It's crazy stuff like this. Just looking at this view, it's like, yeah, this is why I like the Gifford Pinchot.
Yeah, it's especially unique, I feel like.
You may recall from a previous video that I attempted and failed to ride the Klickitat Sisters Trail a few weeks ago, and that attempt was inspired by an Orogenesis work party I attended a month before that. I've been wondering about this trail for a long time, and that's why I initially joined Gabe Tiller for one of his Orogenesis work parties where a group of intrepid volunteers got together to do some maintenance on the Klickitat Sisters Trail. I'm calling this the Klickitat Sisters Trail both because there are historic maps that have that name affixed to it, and in order to differentiate it from the Klickitat Trail in the Columbia Gorge area. And that is a rail trail or railroad to bike conversion trail that is nothing like the Klickitat Sisters Trail in any way whatsoever. But before we started clearing the Klickitat Trail, we did some scouting for the Orogenesis Project, which is a long-term project that aims to revive old trails and create a single-track natural surface mountain bike trail all the way up the west coast of North America, starting at the southern tip of Baja California. So I embarked with Gabe and two other individuals foolish enough to follow him as we scouted an old trail that looked like a promising route to connect this trail to Highway 12.
I just thought I'd point out though, this is how Gabe Tiller is kitted out for bushwhacking. Straight from the like 510s to the jorts, almost Daisy Dukes because the pockets are showing underneath.
The only way.
Yeah. All cotton.
It's the summer tech gear.
The avalanche lilies were out, and it was a perfect day, but the route was steep and it was not a cakewalk getting through these woods. It turns out that 50 years of neglect can leave a trail almost impossible to find. I wasn't even sure if we were on a trail as we pushed through the huckleberries, vine maple, ash, and slide alder. What I am sure of is that you should navigate to patreon.com/voiceovertrails today to sign up and support informational content like this. Things were unbelievably steep, but that's okay because well, it was only going to get worse. It was clear that we were not the only ones interested in this route, as it was obvious someone had been up here before us tying flags to trees, so that means that there's more than a few people interested in reviving this trail. It was a heavy snow year, so even in the middle of July, we were still trudging across feet of snow on parts of this trail. It was an arduous day of bushwhacking and only a small taste of what Gabe and countless others have been investing in this project. But just imagine a piece of bikeable single track traversing this ridge. That alone should interest anyone who likes to travel on two wheels. Also, imagine what 4,000 feet of descent down this terrain would feel like. So in spite of all this, regardless of all this work, I think it's worth it. It was only day one, and by the end of it, my legs already ached and my feet were in pain. And we hadn't even started digging yet. And for what it's worth, this really isn't a bad place to do some work. I mean, just look at this. Even my GoPro footage looks great. Just imagine what this looked like in person. You know you want to see stuff like this from your bike. We all want to see stuff like this from our bikes, and that's why you should be supporting the Orogenesis Project. All right. Enough about scouting, let's talk about trail work, and more importantly, the Klickitat Trail. Gabe started the work party by teaching us about an obscure geographical term that was somewhat apropos for this particular event.
So today's word of the day is blaze. Blaze, meaning a white patch on a horse's forehead, was applied by English colonists to the marking of a forest route by periodically axing off a piece of tree bark to expose a portion of lighter colored wood. The Native Americans, they learned from blaze lightly with tomahawks when pursuing wounded prey to code the way back. For Euro-Americans, the word came to signify both the marking and the making of a path, road, or survey line, and the fact or fancy of blazing a trail took on mythic status with the westward expansion. Many hiking trails still bear blazes made in the traditional fashion or applied as small metal plates instead, usually superfluous in the summer but useful to ski trekkers when snow has buried the trail. There may be woodsmen in some hinterlands of the continent who still, of necessity, blaze trees, but the last blazers are chiefly foresters who use spray paint and plastic ribbons to mark timber sales. For the rest of us, as we blaze into our future, the term has ascended to pure metaphor.
How do you think mountain bikers get their tools into work sites? They haul it in, that's how. And it's not easy hauling in a chainsaw and the associated equipment one needs to operate said chainsaw safely, but Gabe and our other certified sawyer were definitely good sports about it, notwithstanding. And if you put a digging tool in my hand, digging is what you're gonna get. But I ended up discovering there is more benching than a relatively small crew can handle, in addition to more brushing than any one person could handle. We could easily keep a crew of 50 people busy for a whole week just getting this trail back in ship shape. And seeing as it's a 2,000-year-old trade route that follows a 5,000-foot elevation ridgeline for 16 miles through dramatic exposures like this, I think it just might be worth the effort. Although I am well aware that it's pretty difficult to get this kind of thing to properly show up on the GoPro. But as neglected as it may be, the corridor is still there. The trail is still findable, and really most of what it needs is for someone to take a saw to the vine, maple, and slide alder every year, and this trail would be readily usable. Steep, but totally usable. For as remote as this place is, I've seen tread in far worse shape. I've seen trails rehabilitated that were far harder to find than this. Did I mention that this trail has some steep sections on it? This feature right here was lovingly referred to as the wall, and for good reason. The fact that it's readily apparent how steep this thing is, even when I'm using the GoPro, is actually pretty surprising and should give you pause. No one is pedaling their bike up this, I promise. Of course, this is the part we're all here for, which is watching the sawyers work, I guess. Eventually, I did catch Gabe sawing some blowdown up here. Just for the sake of clarity, so no one is tempted to make accusations, that is actually a hard hat Gabe is wearing. It's just shaped like a cowboy hat, but or Forest Service hat. I'm not sure what you call that hat. Anyway, it's actually a certified hard hat. I'm kind of jealous of that hat. It is pretty rad. Saws, by the way, do require maintenance to work well.
Yeah, and then just, that's your gauge.
It doesn't really look like they're tall.
I find they're maybe a little tall. Like, I like to just look at it, take the gauge off, file it, put the gauge on again, because I find it hard to actually file with the gauge sitting there. And then you want to round over the back edge.
Yeah, I don't know if this is doing anything. Like, it doesn't really seem, I mean, that's what I mean, is like, they were really bad.
So yeah, you want to do the cutters first, right? Because you're making them shorter.
Yeah.
And then bigger gauge. So
Chainsaws save a lot of labor, and they do make it much more feasible to keep long and remote corridors like this open, but at the same time, they're a lot of work to carry through the woods. There's no magic bullet here. It would be tempting to think that cutting brush and blowdown would be less physically demanding than digging on the tread, but in my experience, that has rarely been the case. Especially when someone's saw gets pinched in a log. This happens more often than you might think. Like, how do I do this without bending the bar?
yeah, I think because this is actually my only chain.
Okay,
I don't have a spare with me.
so let's not get too clever.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how we would have gotten Dan's chainsaw back if we hadn't had another sawyer nearby. See this tree arching over the trail? The one under obvious tension that could snap back and kill someone if it were cut? Yeah, we left that one alone. No touch. You can't clear a trail if you're dead. And that's that. We ended up clearing about 7 miles of this 16-mile trail. Not half bad, but there's so much more that could be done. So much more that needs to be done. The work is ongoing. Trails like this need friends. I'd like to take this moment to thank all my Patreon supporters, especially my Low Me Goodness level sponsors Andy Suri, Charles Kim, Damon Corey, and Randy Rutherford. I'd also like to thank my Hero Dirt level sponsors, earning their special mention at the end of this video: Bryce Ulrich, Dave P&W, Devin Young, Edward Lanton, Heather Von Valkenburg, Jason Moore, and Pedro Cantarini. If you'd like to click into this list of supporters, navigate to patreon.com/voiceovertrails and choose a support level that fits with what you get out of this channel. Now, get out there and go ride your bike and maintain some trails. Go dig some trail too.